So, welcome everyone. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to come on live. I wanted to come on and talk about the masculine energy and the patriarchal systems and the shadows that are being shown, that are being highlighted to us individually and collectively. So if you're on the dopamine hit and scrolling through, this video isn't for you right now. I invite you to save it and come back to it when it's ready. However, this is really quite a very deep perspective in terms of how we need to look at our health, our well-being, and also how our health is affected by everything. It's not just personal to us, it's about our society, the earth, and everything that entwines with that. And I want to talk about this masculine energy, which is being shown to how we can evolve as humanity, how we can improve our health through that energy, and how we need to evolve collectively too. So I don't watch the news because I trust that what needs to come to my attention will come to my attention when it needs to. And funnily enough, something has come to my attention, which is about the stabbing of those young girls up north in the UK. And then what followed after that, the aftermath of violence and what we could call protesting, but actually it's an act of violence. And now you might think me ignorant because I don't listen to the news, because we all think we have to be really on top of what is happening. However, I have recognized for my health, and what is key for everybody's health, is boundaries, healthy boundaries, and discernment. So I've chosen for my health not to be constantly exposed to the mainstream media that's objective is fear and separation. And the more that gets pushed and the more that you get exposed to, the more overwhelmed and oversaturated that we become. Because we are taken on so much that we can't, and then we emotionally respond to, we can't process, we can't release, unless we discern that, is that true? Can I take an action on this? Can I change my perspective on this? And if the answer is no to that, we have to be able to move things through. And this is why I've set that intention that what needs to come to me will come to me from my observation, from my discernment, from my process. So I want to go into what we have seen with this stabbing of these beautiful young girls, completely innocent. And firstly, we need to ask the questions, why has that happened? What has come to the root, or even a child themselves hold so much anger, so much rage, that they must take it out on young, innocent children that have done nothing to them. Now, this person is born in the UK, so this doesn't fuel the agenda of what has followed forwards and followed afterwards. We need to be able to go, what has caused that? And when it comes to health and when it comes to society, we need to start taking responsibility. How has this happened? How, when we look at the system and go, how has the system failed? And yes, the systems need to be looked at, but we also need to take our own responsibility of how we've allowed that to happen too. Now, when I say take on responsibility, it's not about taking on judgment and shame and guilt. It's about being able to take an empowerment to be able to see, how can this change? How can I take action to stop this from happening? How can I bring a community that is broken back to what it was, what is there, and what is the higher, more involved aspects of humanity? And we need to then look at how the fighting afterwards, the protesting, and how that was used as propaganda against their own agenda. You know, this was about fear and separation, and which we've got to look at, where is that coming from? How are these men mostly coming and raging of so much anger? And we need to be able to see this. And as I talk, like the light and the shadows, we're in summer, it's the sun is at its most powerful, it's at its most highest. It will bring its intensity, will come into the intensity of those shadows. They will be seen in absolute definition. And this is being shown up for ourselves and what is happening collectively and what is in our society. That has always been there. And it's not about taking a side. It's about how we can form a highest perspective to look back in and go, what has broken? What has created this? And this is how I work with the body, is like, how and what is the root of the cause of this? How have we become so out of alignment to ourselves that we live in that way, that the only resort is more anger, more fear, and violence? Because energetically, how we vibrate at is what we receive. Energy attracts energy. So all that fear and separation against the police, against another religion, will just retaliate. That energy will just accentuate and come back. And what I really get frustrated on is actually protesting and calling this protesting. This takes away the right of people to be able to protest, to bring out their voice, and that this pushing against what the police was seen as this patriarchal system, that's what they were representing, which are ultimately people themselves, their parents, their siblings, their children, or somebody else. You know, they're people too. What we will end up getting back is even more power, more control, more violence and suppression. We have to be really mindful of this and not give too much energy in that is the way to go. Our voice is our power, okay? And we need to be able to exercise that with healthy boundaries. And what was really coming forward for me is, again, why are those men generally acting out with such rage and such fear and separation? And we have to look into society to see what is fueling this. And from my perspective, not saying I'm right, but my perspective, it's somehow they believe that there's an injustice, there's an imbalance, there's an unfairness, where they're becoming the victim. So this was something I wanted to come on live to talk about, is the victim, martyr, and perpetrator energy that is really being shown in us individually and collectively. You know, so interestingly, those people that are acting out in that violence, the perpetrators, believe they're a victim. So you can see this ping pong that goes between the two. We've seen it with Israel and Palestine. It's very obvious. You know, both have been perpetrators, both have been victims. What one point the only way to break that is to not seek revenge and to seek forgiveness and commonality and in the common love for them, for their children, for the earth. So these men acting out as perpetrators believe they're a victim. So why do they think they're victims? Because ultimately they've become disillusioned with the systems and think it's unfair. They're working hard, possibly, and they're not getting much back. And life feels hard. Life is unfair. They may well have gone through a schooling system that basically only really celebrates a certain level of intelligence. It doesn't celebrate creativity. It doesn't celebrate being emotionally intelligent. So at a very early age, children are often sidestepped and feel they're not worthy and they're not part of this community. They have nothing. So they become disillusioned. They become angry because underneath that is rejection and fear. Yet men are only really shown the permitted emotion is anger, which is quite the reverse for women. They're not allowed to feel anger, and that's something else. But this isn't for today. And we need to be looking at these fundamental things that are creating this separation and fear in our society. And we need to be looking at the schooling systems. We need to be looking at the money, how money, because ultimately people were living in abundance, there wouldn't be this fight, this war energy. We would be living in much more compassionate, accepting of diversity, because we would just be having a good life if we weren't so set on consumerism and actually started to look for community. There'd be something different. We talk about raising a child. They say it takes a village to raise a child. We have been so driven and pushed by needing money to survive, which is escalating and being cranked up big time, that life is getting harder and more struggling, and they're hitting in survival and they're hitting burnout. They've hit breaking point. They have had enough and they're disillusioned of all of the systems. What is it all for? And the venting out is probably the only way they can sort of express it. But there are many ways that we can, but they believe there isn't another way. So we need to look at a schooling that has people disillusioned and rejected, but do not be valued for who they are and the gifts that they have. Because everybody has a gift. Everybody has a purpose in this life. It's just about finding that with the love and acceptance of that. And the schooling system doesn't show you that. It doesn't. And then we need to look at the governance. We need to look at the greed and the corruption. We need to look at the way we produce fuel and our food. Because ultimately, if we had enough fuel, energy, renewable, and enough, and we're all growing our food, there wouldn't be this fear, this scarcity that is going on. There's big community that would grow that food. And, back before the Industrial Revolution, where basically people said to go be formed into workers. And the schooling systems were created to push into these workers. Now, we before that were working the land. We were living in community. We were living to our strengths to support that community. And we need to start looking at what has become broken to be able to come back to start healing ourselves as humanity, for healing our bodies. I mean, we have 1 in 2 have cancer. We're seeing neural diversity increasing, which I think has a flip side to that. It's actually challenging the system, it's challenging the school systems, but equally we need to understand why is that happening. And a lot of that is due to our food, it's due to the pesticides that are put in there, it's due to the fertilizers. They're not fertilizing the soil anymore. It's been raped so much of its nutrients that it can't produce healthy food for us. So we're consuming unhealthy food that's actually killing us. And we need to start really understanding this and taking ownership and responsibility. And we only do that when we can hold awareness of it. And you can only hold that awareness when you take a moment to stop, to breathe, to get out of that heavily triggered survival patterning that is of fear. It's a very primitive aspect of us. However, our body won't really know, or mind won't know the difference really between what is actually a danger or not. So we need to discern that. We need to create these healthy boundaries that regularly is checking in as to what we're exposing ourselves to and what our thoughts are. And our subconscious mind plays out for 98% of our thoughts and actions. Now, if your subconscious mind has been basically programmed from you as a child, because you're in theta waves when you're a child, so everything that is coming your way, you just receive it, okay, positive and negative. And that would have been the same for your parents. They would have had the experience too, and the parents and the grandparents and everything. So there would have been this real subconscious programming that has gone through our ancestors, as well as the physical trauma and the emotions that come through into our blood and into our DNA, called epigenetics. We are carrying so much through thousands of years of programming, of fear, of trauma, and we are having to break that pattern. But we can only break that pattern when we are in a state of consciousness, when we break those, when we create space to pause and to see and to reflect. And this is really important for our health, for ourselves individually. And when we start taking ownership of that, then we can influence the outer world. It's very easy to look at the outer world and want change, but then feeling disempowered and hopeless, which again has a negative effect on our physical self, because if our neural system sits in hopeless, or it's kind of in a freeze mode. So it's in a very negative vortex reaction. So we need to be able to, first of all, discern what is ours and what is not, to then just, if we can't do anything or change anything, put it to one side, okay? You can be aware of it, but put it to one side. This is why exposure to media that is based on fear and separation, you've got to really discern what you're listening to, because we think we have to know it all to feel in control. Control is a real illusion, okay? Even when you believe you're controlling your thoughts, are you really? Okay, so we have to break through those illusions and start to, with that discernment, and we focus on ourselves. Like I've just mentioned, we actually start changing the outer world by looking at our inner world, okay? So we have to, first of all, cut off from the outer world from a perspective to a degree, not completely so you're isolated in your own world, but in terms of being grounded and connected to yourself, and to be aware of the environment that you're being putting yourself into, be that physically and emotionally, the food that we put into ourselves. And then we can start processing and seeing ourselves and what we are and what is coming up for us to process. So we will be going through our own shadows too, okay? We have to look at our subconscious and the coordinates that it's set at and go, is this serving me? Is this serving me joy? Is this serving me love? Is this serving me peace? Because really, when you boil everything down, they're the three things that we're looking for in life: to have more love, relationships, more joy, and peace, contentment, fulfillment. They're ultimately what we're actually seeking, but we get lost in the state of consumerism and commercialization of that's what's going to give us joy. It never will do. It will only be what you produce from within. And then you become this vibration, this frequency that oscillates out and creates and affects the environment and the people around you. Don't underplay the effect that you can have on people, both negative and positive. But the positive just expands like a ripple effect. The negative is like a stone dropping right down. It doesn't really get very far. Okay, so we really need to be discerning to create our healthy boundaries. And this is what the masculine energy is. Okay, our masculine energy is what holds us. It's the spine of our system. It's the skin. It's the cellular tissue around every cell that holds that cell in place, which allows what I call the feminine to be able to take up that space. So it's the space creation. It's the presence, and the feminine is what fills that. And we are being called to work our masculine wounds. So we have seen for thousands of years patriarchal systems which have abused and controlled the feminine. And a lot of women, and we all are having to do our feminine wounds and our masculine wounds, okay? But as I'm just really talking about the masculine wounds, we need to be able to see the abuse, see the misuse. Now, there's the strength, which is there, which is actually to protect, okay? It's not to disempower and create violence and war. And this is the disillusionment that men are probably feeling. It's because what is my purpose? Because actually I've been told I can't feel emotions, that it's weak, and that I'm a wuss, or that I'm gay if I have this, or I'm a pussy, all this crap that gets put onto men to think that they can't express. They may have a very wounded mother that would have had experienced wounding through the patriarchal, through the masculine energy, that, or through her mother wounds, that had become very heavily in their masculine and pushed men away because they were carrying too much pain themselves, but they didn't have it, what the understanding to break that pattern. So we have men that are carrying this society of you need to be this in a certain way, and also they've had their wounding of the feminine. So we have to be able to break these patterns that are wounding against each other. And when we can do that, I actually see it as this helix, the DNA, the helix, the feminine, the masculine, become the bridge, that they become this greater connection, and this spiral then encourages. We're activating a higher vibration within our minds, within our body. This junk DNA that we talk about, it's not junk, it's just not activated. But we can only activate it when we're working from a higher vibration that is of gratitude, love, compassion, joy, peace. We can't activate it when we're in our low vibration of fear, shame, and guilt, and jealousy, and victim energy. So we have a lot to do as individuals and as a collective. And I would say when you look at things and feel very disillusioned, come back to yourself and start looking at what you can do, what you can take responsibility for you. And it's incredible when you can change the dynamic within yourself. It can change the relationships really close to you very quickly. If you think of everything as energy and you alchemize the energy that you're carrying, where it's more love and more acceptance that you seek from others, give it to yourself first, and you'll suddenly see a shift. We carry a victim energy of like, or martyr energy. And martyr energy comes from victim. It's like somehow you're not equal, but you've probably been a victim at some point. So you've kind of given away your energy, but you become disillusioned, you become resentful. You think, well, I've been doing all this, but I've not got it back in return. It's because in some deep subconscious, we're thinking we have to keep giving ourselves away, especially for women. We have to kind of keep giving to get something back, to get some love or appreciation. It's that self-sacrificing that a lot of women will do because they think, that's what they've been programmed to do. Women have been programmed to sacrifice their inner peace to keep the peace, and just to suck up the anger and the pain, which is when women come into our menopause. This is the liver, anger, hot flushes, rage. It's all about being able to try and purify. And this is when I've talked about rage before. I said I had a bit to say. is when it's acted out to others, it's fear. So the violence that we've seen, that's rage, that's fear, okay? As much as it might look very scary and someone's in a very position of power, still fear, all right? When we allow ourselves to process rage and anger consciously in our space of ourselves, that underneath is love. Because underneath that rage, that fire, someone's really bucked you off, and boom, you're like, okay, and you kind of feel like you need to react or anything like that. You've been triggered, because underneath that trigger, there's something saying to you, I'm worthy of more. I'm worthy of more. And when you see beyond the rage, that fire, you ignite that love for yourself. that worthiness in you. And when you bring that into your belly, bring it into, for women, it's like in your hara, your womb, your pussy. This is to ignite the inner power. For men, it's your hara. You will recognize, okay, I'm worthy of so much more. And then you ask yourselves, how can I take this energy in the most productive, positive way? How can I alchemize this into positive? It's like the fire that burns the forest floor, the debris. It's there to allow this death and this rebirth of something new to grow from that. Okay, we need this fire, we need this rage, but we need to do it in a positive, alchemizing way that brings up this new level of being, to step up in a more compassionate, more awakened state, to create those healthy boundaries and go, no, that doesn't serve me. No is a sentence. This is what, again, women are having to find their voice and being scared of the masculine because of the power there, because they can abuse their strength and their power. The masculine, the pure masculine, is there to protect. It's there to honor and to allow the feminine to grow and to flourish and to bring this balance and compassion and equality back into ourselves and back into our humanity, really. So there's a little bit to unpack there. I appreciate that. This was literally just pouring through me, and I couldn't write it quick enough. I had to just share it and bring it onto video for you. So I would say, from the takers of this, if you're still listening, is discernment and healthy boundaries. And to do that, you need to create space to breathe and to start breaking out the belief systems of that looking after yourself is selfish. To see that it's not selfish, it's self-care. To start to see when you're triggered by things, what's underneath that? What subconscious patterning or unconscious ancestral trauma are you carrying in your body that you need to see for what it is? What shadows are bringing up for you? And this can be many ways, but I would say the key right now, and it has been for a good year or so, it's been coming to my awareness with myself and with clients, but it seems even more accentuated, is this victim, martyr, and perpetrator energy. We have to shift out of this victim energy, this hopelessness, unequal, and we need to see the belief systems, the stories that are being told, that have been told for thousands of years, that you may stay small, that it's not safe to be present, to have your voice, because you know how many people had their heads chopped off, how many witches were burnt at the stake and drowned because they had this power to connect to the earth and to something much more divinely, that somehow it was needed to be suppressed and put through places of worship instead. You know, that was another lead of separation, that you can't find God or consciousness or divine within you. You can only do it through this. And we're going to put it right smack on some sacred sites, which you would have worshipped. But now you have to do it through us instead. You can only access it. And that is disempowerment, that's been separation, and that's fear. So it goes very, very, very deep. And I keep getting told stones and bones, our bones carry this DNA. They carry this trauma that, if you think about it, we turn to ash, we go into the ground, and then we grow back out from the ground. It's in our food. We are carrying all that has gone on before. And we need to start calling it out and to recognize it's not our truth. And love, joy, and peace is our truth. And anything that is not that is the BS, it's the bullshit, it's the systems that have been conditioned to keep us small, fear, and separated. And when you're separated, you're easily in control. Hitler divide and rule. Every system's set up to divide and rule. So we really need to get beyond the fear and the trigger and the rage and this bouncing back between victim and perpetrator. And we do that with ourselves first, okay? So yeah, take some time out, breathe, call out of shadows with ease and grace. And if you're being triggered and you're feeling very disempowered, if you're running that victim energy, call it out. Let that rage come out to alchemize and find your power, okay? And if you need support with this, I have created meditations, visualizations to create this new neuroplasticity to make paths of new thought processes. Because you can't just destroy and then get rid of, you need something else instead. So we need to start creating new pathways of thought to allow the transition to move from one track of thought to the next. And eventually it just overgrows and becomes a distant memory of the old way of being. And then our bodies coming to alignment. We start creating healthy, high vibrational thoughts and emotions within our body. And, you know, shame carries hertz, 30 hertz. It's the same frequency as lead. Joy, 560. Gold is the frequency of love. So we really need to start taking responsibility of our thoughts and our actions, our mind, our body, our health, and we can start making changes. You're more powerful than you've been led to believe. Literally by changing your perspective. So lots of love. Thank you for listening. And if you do want to look up these meditations, then go on to the infinityhealthhub.com, and some are there on for free, others there's part of a membership. And on this coming Sunday, I will be doing the Pajama Revolution guided meditation, and I would imagine along these sort of lines will be what I will be channeling through. Okay, it's a new moon, so I'd imagine it's all about new intentions, new pathways, new ways of thinking, new stories that you decide, you change your story, you take ownership of it. So I imagine it's going to be along those sort of lines. Okay, so lots of love. Thank you for listening and take care.